side, of course. Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to the brand ambassador. Celebrate the brand ambassador. This is episode 42. Going into my God, I think it's my second year of doing this show. So with me today, I have the very notable Marty Duff. We worked together a long time ago as we were both worked for Diageo. He worked.
Wait, did I just join your family? Am I now Marty Duff?
Yeah, exactly. And he's my brother from another mother. So there you go. And then you're crackling there. And then Trevor Fry, who's my dancing buddy at Tales of the Cocktail, but also worked at the very famous Jack Rose Saloon in Washington D.C. and now has his own business representing brands Wash Line. And Marty also now representing the Glencairn whiskey glass line. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's going to be very exciting. And for any of you that are tuning in, feel free to put some things in the chat if you want to ask some questions or give some feedback. We love that. So the show's going to be broken up into two segments. I'm changing things up this year. So the first segment is all about getting to know these two great gentlemen and what their careers are. And then the second part, we're going to talk about the business side of things. You know, what it's like to be a brand ambassador, what's like to be a brand representative, and all that great stuff. So it's a little bit of everything. All right. So gentlemen, I introduce you, but I think you could do a better job yourselves. So I'm going to start with you. Officially, my brother from another mother, Martin Duffy. Tell me what you currently do for a living and what your responsibilities are for that company.
Well, I am the Glencairn brand representative for North America. I am the sole guy. It's just me for all of North America. And actually, I guess for South America too, because there is no me down in South America.
He really wants to go to Brazil.
I really do. I will get a Brazilian to go to Brazil.
I don't recommend it.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend anyone seeing me with it. Yeah, I represent the glass. I basically will go to whiskey events. I visit distilleries throughout the country and through Canada. I deal with orders, though I don't consider myself a salesman per se. I do help put together orders for folks. But I basically just kind of help answer questions, really.
Okay.
And be a conduit. Mainly also, too, I consider myself the graveyard shift because, Glencairn has been closed for the past 3 hours over in Scotland. So I'm it. They're all home having dinner. I'm the lone guy.
You're the lone guy. So some of the questions also about like what's the best way to serve the Scotch in those glasses or any.
I get that. Actually, a lot of times I do seminars at the whiskey events talking about nosing, the appropriate way to nose and taste whiskey out of glassware. But some of that goes back to my Diageo days, whiskey training. Why does a Glencairn glass? What's the point? Why is a Glencairn glass special compared to, say, a rocks glass or a wine glass? Bring up points like that. How to appreciate a whiskey. Why is nosing a whiskey important? Things like that.
That's great. So you're able to tie both careers into one.
It really helped a lot all those years talking about whiskey and going right into the glass business. But now I like to think of myself as the Switzerland of the whiskey industry, in that I can go everywhere. I'm completely neutral. Nowhere.
There is that freedom when you don't work for the company anymore, the company person. I still miss my corporate card, but the freedom to be able to drink whatever I want wherever I am is kind of nice. Granted, we had a pretty killer portfolio, but we're going to dive into that. So, Trevor, So what are you currently doing for a living, and what are your responsibilities within that your own corporation?
Yeah. So I head up Washline LLC. It's a consulting company that I started years ago. Elaine, we laughed about it the other day, kind of like how I got it started. But right now, our main focus is representing brands in the Mid-Atlantic and the East Coast. A little bit more focused on the sales and marketing side. We are very entrenched with distributor relationships, as well as on-premise and off-premise activations, and kind of creating go-to-market strategies and business development plans, as well as all the fun stuff that ambassadors do as far as activations and programming and things like that. So we do that. We have a couple other things on the side that we do consulting with, and government affairs, and actually still some on-premise things as well. So that's what we do. Two main clients right now are J. Rieger out of Kansas City, which is a distillery that was closed because of prohibition. And then our good friend Ryan Mabey found out about and kind of relaunched with the help of Andy Rieger, who's the great-great-grandson of Jacob Rieger. And they make great stuff. So they've got a vodka, a gin, which is made by Tom Nickel, who was with Tanqueray for a really long time.
I love
the late great
so
good old Tom.
I know, he's great. The late great Dave Pickerel could help them create their Kansas City whiskey, and they have a Cafe Amaro as well. I don't know why these lights have these like crazy motion sensor lights. It just dimmed on me, but I'll try and fix that. And then we also represent 10 to 1, which is a new rum that was launched by Mark Farrell. It's a blended rum out of the Caribbean. It's really, really fantastic stuff. When we were approached by them, it was the time where we were looking to kind of expand our bag. We've had a lot of great traction with J. Rieger, and our goal with Washline and working with brands was to find really great brands with really good people behind it, because that really makes the selling a lot easier. And so we signed them on the beginning of 2020, and their juice is it's got such a good story behind it. And, they're taking blends from different distilleries in the Caribbean. The name 10 to 1 was actually a saying, I think, from the Trinidad, it was like the Secretary of State basically for Trinidad, but basically that the Caribbean nations were stronger together than apart, so 10 to 1. So that was ahead of the Caribbean.
Very impressive, and the rum is delicious. Yeah, it's a good guy.
Yeah, so it's really, really nice. We're doing some really exciting things. So it's been fun to kind of help and watch them grow and really be a part of that. And we had a really great year. Last year in 2020, and all the nuances that came along with it in 2021 as well. So
you're an excellent brand ambassador. You gave all the fine points of all the things. I'm surprised you didn't hold up your bottles. You failed points for that. Like no. There you go. There's no bottles.
Yeah, well, that's just my water bottle. Yeah, no bottles. That's
you should start repping that water.
Marty, at least held up his glass, so
we've got plenty of Marty's glasses actually where I'm at right now, which is
excellent.
Exciting.
Plus, I'm also
that we love.
Look
that.
at that.
All right.
The Glencairn shirt. Always be branded. Always
have all the brands. All right, so we're gonna go talk a little bit about your guys' experience within the whiskey industry. So Marty, like you and I worked together. Not really, we kind of worked parallel to each other. We knew of each other. Once in a while, we're in the same room. You were the master of whiskey at Diageo, amongst various other roles. I know you also took a reserve brand role, and you've worked for, we were talking about yesterday, Benedictine as a representative of them, and Trevor, and many other things in the industry. You're legendary there, and been noted as one of the most influential people in Chicago, right? Magazine.
Who, me?
Yes.
Me?
Definitely not you.
Yeah, you.
I don't know if I'm that influential in Chicago. I was one of Chilled Magazine's top 100.
Top 100. Yeah. That's it. Hey,
I think I was only the top first.
Go ahead.
I think it was only the first 100 answer when they sent out.
Fair enough. It still works. I've never been the top 100 of anything. So, you are the person when I remember asking a question on Facebook about Chicago, and everybody's like, just ask Marty. He knows everybody. And Trevor, you were working for many years as a beverage director at the famous Jack Rose Saloon in Washington, D.C. And for those of you who've never been there, the collection of whiskeys on that back wall was incredible, and it was such an incredible experience. Intimidating. Yeah, exactly. It was just like, where do you start? And your team was always so great at helping us with that. And so I want to hear your story, because you guys both have like very fun stories about how you got into the spirits industry and how you got into whiskey. So Marty, I'll start with you.
Well, as you and I were talking yesterday, a lot of the I started off as a master of whiskey. Actually, a little go before that. So I started off in acting back well into the 1980s. Hello, old. And I was doing improv, and then improv. I thought I gotta get out of improv because it seems so political, believe it or not. So I thought I'm gonna get into legitimate theater. Oh my God, is that even more political? So I got out of that. I thought I'll do commercial work. Oh, even more political. But you know, that's the career I chose. But it was so hard to make money. So I did what every other actor was doing, and I got into the restaurant industry. So I started working, waiting tables. I saw bartenders made more money, so I became a bartender. I started working at 4 a.m. bar in Old Town here in Chicago back in 1990, so 32 years ago. But I was thrown behind the bar, had no training, and I had no idea what the hell.
I hear that story so often.
I remember pouring somebody a cognac, and I knew you put it in a brandy snifter, but I figured, well, you pour it to the top, don't you? I mean, that's what you do. It seems weird to just pour this much. You have to pour it to the top. So I had no idea.
That bartender.
there was no training. I had no idea what brands were, what differences in spirits were, other than colors. So time went on. You learn a little more. There were no brand ambassadors. There were books, but you had no idea what books to buy. There was no internet. You know, I had no direction until you started seeing liquor promotions. It was mainly beer, but slowly but surely you started seeing a few liquor promotions, spirit promotions. And my sister owned a staffing company, and so she started hiring me to do some liquor promotions. One day, I saw that U.S. Concepts was hiring a bunch of guys to run around in kilts for the Kilted Clan for Johnny Walker. So that's great. What do we have to do? Well, you have to wear this terry cloth towel around your waist, run into bars and buy people drinks, and then like within 10 minutes buy a bunch of people drinks and tell them real quick what Johnny Walker Red is.
I remember those blitzes. I was a promotional model when those blitzes were happening.
Yeah.
For U.S. Concepts.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was fun. It was good money. I think we were being paid $25 an hour.
Yeah, which back then was a lot of money.
And it was maybe 3 hours long, so $75 and for 3 hours, and that was great on top of my bartending. And so I got to do that more and more. And since I was already an actor, they liked the cut of my jib. So when they wanted staff trainers to go in and talk about it, so they gave you a script, and you know, you read a script. But man, it was tough because now, you know, these same bartenders, they're the same as I was. They started asking you questions like, what the hell was peat? And how did the peat get in there? And you go, yeah, I don't know. It's not in the script. They didn't tell me. And so that went on for about 7 years. They trained us more and more, and it got a little more intensive, but still you were getting a lot of the marketing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's marketers telling you the stuff, you know. You still hadn't gone to Scotland yet. You hadn't, but then they started I started at least dealing a little more with Evan Katnack.
Yeah.
Evan was a master distiller emeritus. He had worked at 13 different distilleries for United Distillers. Diageo didn't exist yet. It was Shefflin Somerset was the importer of Johnny Walker and Tanqueray, and they actually owned Dewar's at the time. They hadn't, the whole bunch of big corporate breakups were about to happen pretty soon. The evolution of what is now Moet Hennessy and Diageo, and the breakup of Seagrams and all sorts of stuff. Anyways, we started to do these Johnny Walker mentor events, and they saw great success. Johnny Walker used to come in second to Chivas in the United States. Next thing you know, man, they left Chivas in the dust because of these things. We were doing 300 people a night, two different sessions of 150
They were
people
luxurious.
each.
They were really well done events.
They were really well done.
Like experiential events back in the day.
Big time. You've got Johnny Walker. You had a couple of the single malts that went into it. So you got components. It was really, for the time, it was really, really well done. You might have a chunk of peat, some wood, all the components that I never got as a bartender. And yet this was for consumers who were still, saying, what's the difference? What's a double malt? They're still wondering what a double malt was. And so next thing you know, they wanted to take some of us, what we were called Johnny Walker Scotch ambassadors, and they really wanted to hone it down to just a handful of us. So they selected 7 of us through a kind of a audition process. And so they selected 7 of us throughout the US. In a way, we were supposed to replace Evan, who was, at this time getting up into his
70s,
60s, 70s.
Yeah.
And they wanted younger people too. It was a little weird though, because we were still wearing kilts, and none of us were Scott. Well, I guess
eventually they changed you guys out to wearing Marty suits.
Hugo Boss suits.
Boss suits.
Mine never fit. They gave me a suit that didn't fit me, which was horrible because it was such an expensive suit. But initially we had these whole Bonnie Prince Charlie.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful setup. But here I am, an Irish kid from the southwest side of Chicago, and the people are expecting to see Evan Kotnak, this great burly Highlander guy, coming in with a great Scottish accent, a big bony head. Oh, he's coming in there, and he actually made the whiskey. So I used to come in and do a fake Scottish accent at first. I was, hello, everyone. How are you? Hey, it's Martin Duffy. If you notice a slight bit of an accent, it's bogus. I'm actually from the southwest side of Chicago. I'm sorry about that. And, that kind of broke the ice a little bit, and they didn't care too much. And you just kind of made it fun. Anyways, we did that for, I think that was January 2nd, 2003 is when we went live as Masters of Scotch. And we were full time. And at that time, we had no blueprint of what to do. They just threw us out. We were like little kids at the end of the pier, and Dad just threw us out into the water and said, swim. And because there were no brand ambassadors, I don't even think they really had an idea.
No, they had no idea.
They figured they gave us an education. They brought us to Scotland for a week and gave us the malt advocate course. And that was great, but it was still only a week's worth as opposed to, Evan's lifetime of education on Scotch. And so, and then you slap the title Master of Whiskey. I'm no freaking master of whiskey. There's some guy out there.
But you guys did get we're but to compare it to so many other people out there, I work for the same company, and as brand ambassadors, we had the first like Ciroc and Don Julio, like Tanqueray brand ambassadors. I managed them. We created the very first ever team, and there was no training like that. We didn't get to go to Ciroc. I mean, I finally got to go to Ciroc, and I got to go to Tanqueray 10, but most of them never did. So the Masters of Whiskey actually, you guys got some seriously intense.
We did, and it was a great time, especially those first 3 or 4 years were golden times. We were always going to Scotland at least once a year, and even when we went, and they had these planned things for us, a group of us would break off and we'd take about 4 or 5 days on our own and visit the distilleries that were never talked about. Like we'd go visit Dalwhinnie on our own, or Teaneck, or Kleinleash, or Glencairn. We go do all this stuff on our own, or go to Isla or Traipse, and go visit competitors. Go see what everyone was talking about, Macallan, Glenfiddich and Glenlivet, and go see what those places were like, because those were your competitors. That's what you want to see. And that was
it was an amazing program, and I know we're going to talk about it more later on, because I definitely have a question, because obviously things have changed within the industry and how that was run, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I want to give Trevor, tell us how you got into like whiskey and spirits and like the industry.
Oh man, probably a little less exciting, a little more traditional. One of my first jobs growing up was in restaurants. So I started off as a host at a place called Memphis Barbecue in the suburbs of DC, because I was 15 and that was all I could do. And then when I turned 16, I was allowed to serve, but I couldn't carry alcohol. And it's a pretty casual spot, but there was a lot of whiskey being sold. This was probably 2000, 2001. And it was mostly bourbon, what was, available for bourbon back then. So I couldn't carry any of it. I was always asking questions about it, because I, kind of had a knack for the upsells and trying to make as much money as I could when I was then. So I worked, in restaurants pretty much through high school, went to college, worked at a great local chain here in DC called Clyde's. And that's really the first time I got exposed to like what would be considered like craft bartending. That would be like 2006, 2007. Bartenders at Clyde's were there for life, because honestly, the money was so good, but it was held in pretty high regard. And I got a lot of exposure on the classics, and the training that was there was awesome. Then I kind of left that, went into the government contract world for a bit, where Elaine, we kind of talked about it yesterday, but like I got exposure to like sales training that at the time I thought was just a royal waste of time. And then now that I've kind of grown up a little bit, I was like, this all kind of makes sense. I do remember there's like Myers-Briggs and all these like, different tests you had to take to figure out like what kind of, personality type you are. So that was pretty good. I started bartending on the side just because I'm a little ADD and I needed something to do to kind of keep me excited. And then started up an Irish whiskey bar, which again, for an Irish guy, a little cliche, but was great. It was right in DuPont. It was a lot of fun. It had like a good mix of a massive Irish whiskey collection, but also like high volume. So I got really used to that. And then scooted over to Jack Rose in the end of 2012. I'd kind of known that crew from being around town. I used to go up to Bread Soda, which was one of Bill's spots up in Glover Park. From there, I took over as the beverage director in like the end of 2013. I did that for a couple of years, and it was really great. But I mean, that was like, I was so used to kind of the high volume, and I did some like nightclub stuff here and there. It was a different pace, but having that high volume really helped out on the weekends because that bar got packed. And to be able to kind of know how to deal with, multitasking and handling the weeds and not like, losing focus on stuff. It was great. But I mean, the education via osmosis there, when you have people like Bill and like Harvey and Roberto and everyone that just has decades and decades of knowledge, and all they want to do is share it with you. So even when you're working and it's like maybe the beginning of a shift and you're making sure, all your mise en place is in place and they're just talking through the history and stuff. It was fun to kind of like hear some of the things that like I had heard like growing up. Like my mom's side of the family's from the South, like there's like a moonshine kind of area of Franklin County, Virginia, and then going to school in Tennessee, there was always whiskey around, and it kind of like pulled everything together from things that I had heard when I was younger. And I've also just had this like kind of crazy recall, and so like I could hear things kind of in transition and I would process them, and then I would be able to follow up later like, hey Bill, like you were talking about like the old Princess Distillery was where Eagle Rare was really was originally made. And he's like, what? Like, and like, so then I could really, like, you could kind of like hone into that. But yeah, I was there for almost, I think, like just over 4 years. And then I left to do my own bar, which was called 5 to 1. And that was mainly a cocktail bar, but over those years at Jack Rose, I was so fortunate to have access to the largest whiskey collection in the Western Hemisphere, but also really fine folks for brands who were coming in all the time, whether it was whiskey brands or other spirit brands. And being in the buyer position there, it was just like you got the chance to interface with them, hear their stories, hear how they got there, and kind of like hone my skills as a buyer and operator before moving over to do my own space. So it was a really fun time. Also, obviously, got to travel all over the place. When you're doing the beverage for a place like Jack Rose, you get to go to the Tales and the Bar Institutes and the World's Best 50 and all that kind of stuff. So I felt very fortunate, and combined that with some of the competition stuff I was doing, in like 2013, 2014. I really feel like I was very fortunate at a time, in DC where like we were really starting to kind of get our feet underneath us in that kind of cocktail, in the cocktail world. So I opened up a bar in the basement of Jack Rose called Dram and Grain, which was your classic. Yeah, it was like your classic. It was 26 seats, and it was in the basement, and we had just some absolute stellar, super rare whiskey down there, but also was more cocktail focused.
Tell them why you can have really rare whiskey, like about the tax thing that happens in DC. Like,
oh yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so DC has got really interesting liquor laws, and it's what separates it from a lot of other places, and honestly the rest of the world. So the first thing is that if it's not regularly available through distribution, you can bring things in from private collection to sell. So that becomes huge with like not only allocated products, but super old whiskey. So, Bill, there's there's Marty. He's the whiskey hunter. He would go and he would find these collections, or he would find estate sales and whatever, and he would have these crazy bottles that obviously weren't available anymore. But you pay the same rate, when you bring it in to the alcohol control board. It's called ABRA here in DC. There he is. Well, now I've shifted to a different part of the screen. I gotta. So yeah, it's the same amount. So to bring in like 64 Bowmore, which is thousands and thousands of dollars, it's the same amount to bring in like a bottle of J. Rieger, which is a fraction of that. So that really allowed Jack Rose to build the collection and have that available, and also price it the way that they did. And that was one thing that I really tip my hat to the team at Jack Rose for. Is like day one when you start there, they're like, this is a library, not a museum. We want people to taste our stuff. We're going to try and price it as fair as possible. And as that bourbon boom started, when I left, I remember we looked back at some of the old menus. It was like you used to not have a problem getting things like Pappy. And then as it got more popular, and then we had to go to the secondary market to get it and then bring it in through that process, it drove the price up. But still, I mean, yeah, I think it was like $35 an ounce for Pappy 23 when I started there. And then, I think you're talking about a bar that's got almost 3,000 whiskeys from all different types, all over the world, all different decades and eras. And we were still doing, I think, like 60, maybe 70 bottles of Pappy a year. And you just obviously aren't getting that in allocation. So, it was
the best marketing plan. I don't want to dive into the Pappy Van Winkle thing, but it's like, it is definitely one of the best marketing that they could ever do. It's like, let's make it rare. I mean, I'm sure there was some truth to it, but at the end of the day, it just drove, and then consumers started like asking for it because it must be good.
Though, did you guys ever see the bar in Louisville, Meta, that did Jello shots with Pappy?
Yeah.
No.
That's great.
Yeah, Jeremy Johnson. He's a character. That was great. Yeah, it's interesting because having exposure to all the whiskey that I had at Jack Rose, it's like some people that's how they like to experience whiskey. You know, they like to get the sought after stuff, and that's totally fine. You know, for me, like I always kind of preferred the Lot B, just because that 12 year was for my palate kind of what I like. The 15 year is like a little bit higher proof, but you really start to get into that like chewy oaky side of it. But yeah, I mean, obviously with everything else, like it's great marketing, right? There's a reason that the marketing budget for all liquor brands is what it is. I mean, you can say like Tito's. I mean, Fireball is another one where it's like, when I heard that story, that I don't know if you guys heard this, but you know, Fireball almost fell flat on its face when it came out, and everyone wanted this like weird cinnamon whiskey. And I know a lot of people like to make fun of it and whatever, but it's still, well, I think numbers are going down, but whatever. But basically what they would do is they would go into these big college towns when there was big games, and they would send these marketing teams out, probably not in kilts like you were in Marty, but if the team won, their marketing teams would go out to the bars that everyone was at, and they would offer to buy groups of people shots, and it would be Fireball. And it was almost like conditioning this like young drinking generation of when you're in a group and you're like, hey, you guys want to do a shot? It's like Fireball. And that like vibe,
initiation kind of thing.
It was definitely brilliant. All right, let's not go down too far at the end of the rabbit hole. But no, I never heard that story before. But yeah, it makes sense. I do remember Diageo's CMO came to me. He's like, Elaine, we need a competitor for Fireball. I said, no, we really don't. I was like, people just drink Fireball because it's Fireball. They don't drink it because they think it's whiskey or anything else. It's a kitschy thing to drink. I was like, there is no competitive. I was like, just make something else that's completely different and just do the same a different campaign to get them drinking that as a shot. I was like, they don't drink it because they like it. They just drink it because they did a good job of making it kitschy and
now you have Screwball.
All right, exactly. Now Screwball's like the next one, and you know, and
there'll always be something new.
Exactly.
It was Grand Marnier. Like when I was coming up, it was Grand Marnier, and there was no marketing dollars behind it. It was just the thing on the bar that only the bartenders would drink. And so it was like,
that was the bartender shot of choice. I remember that. I remember.
I thought that was classy when I was young. I used to drink Marnier as a classy guy. Actually, we used to sell that. That used to be. Was that part of the Shefflin?
That was part of Shefflin's, but now it's Moet and Hennessy. But it was part of Shefflin, and I used to sell it. And we tried getting that promotion back because we tried getting bartenders drinking again, but it kind of had already missed its day. So everything, it has its moments. Before we start talking about the business side of things, I do want to talk about something. We were talking about this yesterday, Marty, and I would love to hear, Trevor, if you have any thoughts about this, as somebody who's, you're not as old as we are, but you are, you're not young anymore either.
Yeah,
I know. Get to that part of being Irish, right? Age like a baseball glove.
That's a great expression. All right, so Marty, we talked about this yesterday because you've had a long career, and varied career, definitely working different parts, being a brand ambassador. And I know, in addition to being a brand representative, you also have a show called Sip of Knowledge, which is about whiskey. So if those of you who have not tuned in, I got to tune into it last week. It was really fascinating to listen to. Where can people find it, Marty?
You can go to zavvy.co. It's also, you can find it on Facebook.
Fantastic.
And it's always posted up onto YouTube.
Fantastic. Well. Sip of Knowledge. So yeah, it really is. It's great conversations about whiskey with different characters. And you were speaking to a former master of whiskey, Rick Edward, who also, I don't think I ever met him. Even though
former Chippendale.
Former Chippendale. I don't doubt it. He's a handsome. He
is.
And we talked about a little bit. You touched on something on ageism, right? Within the brand ambassador role, and I didn't think about it until you talked about it. But I think it's so crazy because you would think in whiskey, if any role that you could grow old into would be whiskey, because I don't know, even myself, even if I was 20 years ago, I still would want to listen to the older person who might have been to, Scotland, who has all this vast amount of knowledge, right? Because you think they're wise, because you think whiskey and you think they must have to, be older and wiser, at least in my mind. So do you have any thoughts about why you think this is happening? Is it just, because
it's marketers, and it's always been? I mean, we were hired not just because Evan was, it wasn't like Evan was slowing down. Evan wanted a work more. And then at one point they got him on some kind of contract where he was being paid per event. So obviously he was making less if he wasn't working more. Right. He was being paid less. So he came to us and said, "Hey guys, they're not paying me. I mean, I'm not getting any events. Could you guys ask them to send me to your markets?"
And so Catnack, like the master distiller for how many
he's the guy who introduced whiskey dinners to the US.
Yeah.
He's the guy who was doing seminars. He was the guy who did all this stuff. He initiated. There was none of this stuff before. It was him and Gordon Bell and a few of the other old-timer retired distillers. And so they were weaning him out. And it was mainly because he didn't fit the demographic. And then when they got rid of the Masters of Whiskey, all you had to do is kind of look in 2016 when they switched over marketing companies. They got rid of all the remaining Masters of Whiskey. And I mean, obviously there's two things. One, some of the guys who were there the longest, one, they're old. Two, they had big paychecks. So they got rid of them. But they did ask back those who are under 40. However, they're offering different roles, which probably would have, different paychecks too. Mm-hmm. It's an ageism thing. Now, however, I don't think it's strictly just, I've known other people in the industry, as far as brand managers who've also gotten this for no other reason, who have been with the company for a long time. Then all of a sudden, they say, "Hey, you know what? Hey, we're not going to have your role anymore, but as soon as we let you go, we're going to hire somebody else to kind of do your job anyways, but they're much younger." Isn't that weird?
It's definitely an interesting thing. I mean, Trevor, I don't know if you've noticed it, but I definitely noticed, like Simon Brooking. Do you know Simon? Have you ever met Simon?
Yeah, I know Simon very, very well. Yeah.
He's probably the oldest brand ambassador out, in the whiskey world. I don't know if there's anybody else. Simon's got to be in his early 50s, mid 50s.
No, he's 60.
60? Okay.
Yeah, he's old. I just turned 59, and I think Simon's 2 years older than I am. So he's about 60, 61.
And then there's Spike McClure, who works for the distributor, though.
Yeah, right. So I think he's a little different. Because I think if you work at a distributorship, most of those guys usually retire about 65. So he's not necessarily a brand ambassador per se.
No, he's not. But Trevor, do you know any older brand ambassadors?
I mean, I listen, Martin, I definitely see where you're coming from. I think there's like kind of a side of that industry that is tough, because I think a lot of it comes down to budget. And I think you see that across the industry, but to your point, it's like when you get really good at your job and you become more in demand and you demand value compensation, at some point, especially, I think notably that, that marketing company switch over, they're like, whoa, we're paying what, to these people. And that was across the board. You saw it across the board. I mean, that was a tough year. There was was it 2015 to 2017? I think, and Elaine, we talked about this, that just all Pernod Ricard got broken up. The whole Diageo thing happened. You saw people that were going more towards part-time bartender being ambassadors, which we can talk about later. But I think it's tough. And I think, the ageism, I think especially in the whiskey world, I want to, tip my hat. I mean, Lynn, Lynn House, she was holding out. Tracy Franklin, there's barriers on the gender side that I think are almost as tough. Jenna Murray, Lynn, Tracy, I talk to them, when as frequently as I can, but I was like, those are people that I still bounce off knowledge all the time. And I think have been able, as the dust settled, to kind of really stand aside from that. And, so as far as an age thing goes, yeah, Simon's probably up there. But as people have kind of it's also tough with everything that's happened during the pandemic. Everyone got furloughed, and now I'm hearing horror stories about everyone that's being rehired is either actually a distributor rep that's just falling under like a weird, brand blanket, and coming in at like a fraction of the salary.
Right.
And I think, that's up. But I mean, Martin, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I remember when that happened. I know a lot of people that impacted, but for me, like, I've always seen, especially on the whiskey side, and I'll just speak to that because of my time at Jack Rose, but like, it's been celebrated throughout, especially the American history of whiskey, is that the knowledge that is handed down, and that's why you saw, all of the families of Kentucky, where the Russells, the Beams, or whatever, like knowledge was handed down. You worked, you raised barrels, you worked in the rick house, you kind of learned a side of it. So I cherish my times with Harvey. And I think as far as a brand ambassador goes, like, Harvey Fry in the whiskey category, like, it's hard, like the unofficial brand ambassador. But we would sit and watch baseball and just talk. And I cherish it. We do it as much as I can, because it was just like, that is where I learned so much. And so I think, that there should be a conversation about the balance.
I was gonna say, sorry, not to cut you, but like the balance, like there is a thing. I think your point is like, there is that wisdom, right? So it's like, and as you said, they're passing wisdom down. So there should be right now out there in the world, if brands were smart, they should be picking up all the senior brand ambassadors who used to be these whiskey guys to be like the forefront and like teaching all the younger ones that are coming up, or to be like the head. Like, this is our master. He's been in this industry doing this for 25 years. He's been to 100 distilleries, been to 200 distilleries, over whatever. There is nothing you can ask them that they don't know, because, they've been through all the courses. And people, you should be like the Mecca.
Well, there is two things that I thought of when a lot of this was happening, and I don't think it was just 2016. I mean, this has been happening for quite some time, because for some weird reason, I get a lot of people contacting me for jobs. Like, I don't know why. I do post a lot of jobs on the Chicago page, and so people might think I have some kind of, but it's just because I get a lot of postings from LinkedIn and various pages, and so I share them. That's all. But I see a lot of these where people get, ousted at suspicious ages, So, but two things I thought, one, I think a lot of brand ambassadors should make themselves a little more valuable by learning a lot more and opening up themselves to the possibility of moving into management a little more. I know a lot of them don't like that idea, because they think, I got to start doing paperwork and stuff. But you know what? You can't be a brand ambassador forever.
Nope.
It takes a lot out of you. I mean, I think I've broken a lot of my body going out 6 nights a week. Sunday was my day off. But I go out a lot. And I think you just can't do that for very long. Then there's the other thing I thought a big missed opportunity, especially with the brand ambassadors, with a lot of these older guys who, maybe they can't travel as much, but you open up an academy. This should have been done years ago. Now you'll see a bunch of other people doing this. Now you have a number of different certification courses, and you're doing this with the Brand Ambassador Academy. Why wasn't this done by one of the big companies? Why didn't you think about doing this? There's all this talent out there. You got whiskey writers, you got distillers, you have all these people who have retired but who don't want to be retired.
Right. Yeah.
Or people you think, you're kind of too old to do this job. Well, you know what? Have them teach a class. Have them do, seminars. Have them come in and talk. They love that. Plus, they feel needed.
Marty, maybe we need to create a Facebook page of like all the talent that's out there, and then we could pitch it to like all the brands. Like, do you know that? Well, because a lot of people forget they exist, right? Because it's like, if you're not on social media, you're not doing it out. The brands forget you're out there. You're putting yourself out there. I think that's another big point. To your point, is like, you do need to advance. You do need to kind of up your game. You need to take classes. You need to learn about brand and strategy so you can become more valuable to the brands themselves. And you do need to be up to date on social media. And, some people hide their head still, especially if you're elder, they don't want to do it. And Trevor, I know I cut you off. I'm sorry. What was did I finish your point for you or?
No, yeah, basically. But yeah, I mean, I think that element, the social media element, was a little bit of a factor in that. I've definitely like pumped the brakes on social media. I still post every now and then, but I think it's really easy to get wrapped up and like focusing so much on it. But I do think, for me, like my best attended events or activations or whatever, I'll share a post on it, but I'm like going into places, telling people about it, like texting people, emailing like our list. And that's how you actually, it's like, that's how, and I don't know, maybe I could be wrong and I'll be called a boomer or whatever, but I think a lot of people are like, oh, I can just put something on my story and like, I've got 3,000 followers. And so, 1,500 people should show up. And it's like, it's just not really how it works. Like there's so much stuff flying at people all the time that I think it is a time where you can go back and use some of those classic methods of just like directly reaching out and making sure that you're getting people there, making sure they know about it. I mean, like, when 5 to 1 first closed and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, I just was like, I love education. So I was putting on these like free education things. Phil came down and did one on Geneva. We had Tim come down and do it on Irish whiskey. And I was like, I created an Eventbrite. It was free for anyone in the industry. They got a little lunch, they got a little happy hour afterwards. And all it was like a dedicated person who's like, an expert in that field. And you got to listen to them and ask questions for an hour. And that's how I invited people, because I wasn't on social media at the time. It was like it was a weird time in my life where I didn't want to be so present in the spotlight. I was dealing with the closing of my first brick and mortar, and every single one was sold out. We had people that were like waiting to get in. It was like the 50 seats went like that. And so I think there's definitely room for some more like classic styles of like outreach and things like that the folks that have been in it for a little bit longer might have used before. But I think, Martin, I think you're totally right. I think it's also like, it's tough. A brand ambassador it's a marketing position, and you're expected to be on and out. And, and as there's been a shift in focus to, the kind of, balance in your life and things like that, it gets tough because it's like, I don't want to go out 6 nights a week. And then the 2 nights I do have set aside to go out, it's like, I'm trying to hit every place I can, So I think we do different programming, right? Like we do morning runs where I invite people and I'm like, hey, I'm doing it anyway. So like, if you guys want to go run the trails, and so it's like, I get 7, 8 people, show up in the morning and we get to run, have a cup of coffee afterwards, send them on their way. That's how I can stay present, at least in with all that stuff like that. So
you can't rely on social media for everything. You do need to have an outreach. You do need to do the old fashioned way, but I do think you have to stay up to date. You do, as a person, no matter what, you have to continue your education. You can't become complacent. You do have to just keep staying with the times and upping your game. All right, guys. So I'm going to switch the conversation over to a little bit more of the business side of things. So Trevor, we're going to talk about, I get this question a lot, by a lot of brand ambassadors who kind of struggle with this. And it's basically, you were a beverage director, you worked at a whiskey bar. A lot of people approached you, probably, pitching their brands, talking about them. So what are some of the ways, what are some of the things you saw people do wrong when they try to approach you? And what are some of the things that they did right, or that it really worked for you, that made you like, that's the brand I'm going to, or this is the brand we're going to showcase?
Yeah, I think and we talked about this, I've been able to kind of use that experience to do what I do now as with my approach. But like, appointments are huge. Like if you try and cold call me at like 5:05 on a Friday, like it's going to start off that meeting bad. You just like come in, introduce yourself, and like leave a card like, hey, I'd love to set up some time to chat. That's awesome. That's a great first step, because that way I can kind of do what I need to do. I don't feel like I'm blowing you off, but I'm also not like neglecting my other things.
But what if I give you my card? Am I supposed to wait for you to call me, or now can I like reach out to you and text you and say, hey, can I?
Listen, if you hand me your card, I'm most likely going to give you mine back. And at that point, like 100%, I would always say like, yeah, like I do it now. I just send a quick follow-up email if I get back to the hotel when we're on the road or whatever. I send it in the morning. I say, hey, it was great to meet you last night. I mean, I'm in town for the next couple of days. If there's some time that works for you, let me know. Whatever. Really enjoyed X, Y, and Z. Being at Jack Rose, like obviously our focus was on whiskey, and we had every whiskey brand come through, and they wanted to get on the walls. But I think transparency when you walk in is super key. Like tell me what your whiskey is, tell me what it isn't, tell me where the category it fits in, tell me how you would sell it. Because as someone that was in charge of a beverage program, I need to know how to sell it, but I also need to train my whole staff on how to sell it. So once we get past those stages of like taste it, okay, like you can give me all the nerdy stuff on production or sourcing and all that stuff. I'm totally but be honest about it, be genuine about it. Don't try and pull one over on me. Because I remember a fairly popular brand we won't get into was pulled off our shelves because there was dishonest marketing behind it. And Bill, the CEO of that distillery, came in, and Bill just flat out told him, like, no, like give me a reason why X, Y, and Z. And so I think that goes a long way. So being like respectful of time, whether it's
you mentioned about giving
training.
2 points too. Yeah, I was gonna say some.
Yeah. So I mean, like, we don't have 15 minutes behind a bar to sell your whiskey, and we have 3,000 whiskeys. So like, you need to tell me how your whiskey stands out and why my staff should be selling it. If someone comes in, they're like, I want an American whiskey that's kind of different and I've never had it before, and I can say in 10 seconds, oh, you should try this, and this is why, and this is what it's kind of similar to, but this is what makes it different. And someone would be like, awesome. Because there's that trust that's already kind of implied between our guests and our staff, especially at Jack Rose, that, we know what we're talking about. A lot of times it's like, put yourself in our hands. So yeah, I think that was super important, but also just know kind of like, and we talked about this, Elaine, like, know who you're like, I will give anyone the time of the day, especially if they like, are respectful and kind of go that route. But I'm going to be honest with you. And like, if I don't have room in my, cocktail program for a flavored vodka, I'm just going to tell you, like, that's probably not something I want to taste right now. But if you have something that I think could fit in, like, it still is a business interaction. And then, yeah.
Know your audience.
Yeah.
I mean, would you be annoyed though if they pitched the flavored vodka to you? Like, would you be annoyed? Be like, do you know where you are?
I would never talk down on anyone, but I would just,
Sure.
like when I go into a place, I do a little recon before, so I know who I'm talking to, kind of what their concept is, and I would say, hey, I've got six styles of spirits here. I've got a vodka, I've got a gin, I've got a whiskey, I've got a Amaro, I've got a light rum, I've got a dark rum. You let me know what works best or what you think would work in your program. I don't want to waste your time having you taste something that doesn't work for it. And just that like 10 seconds, like really disarms, the buyer, whoever I'm talking to. They're like, oh, okay, this person like is respectful of my time and is not trying to push, something on me that doesn't work. So I think that's super important, But yeah, I think that, I think going in and Martin, to your point, like the selling, the ability to sell is something that I think a lot of brand ambassadors could use some strengthening on, because I'm like, I need to know, I don't have 15 minutes. Like I said, I need to know in 10 or 15 seconds, how would you like your whiskey position? How would you like your, gin position? How would you like your cognac or your brandy? Like, how do you like it positioned to your guests? Because you're not going to come behind the bar as a brand ambassador and sell it all night. My staff is, and I need to be able to tell them how to do that for two reasons. One, it represents your brand in the way that you want it to be represented. But two, I don't have to go and then take 30 minutes to do a bunch of research and find all this stuff and then, kind of formulate it myself. So I'd say those are the two things.
That's after you've already said you take it in.
What's that?
I'm assuming that's after you told them, you'd take it in. Because if they told you how they want to position, or would that be before?
Oh no, I mean, I want to hear it. I would ask that. I'd be like, tell me how you sell this to me. I'll give you 30 seconds. Sell it to me.
Right. Where does it fit in my bar? How would you sell it?
Yeah.
Why do you think it fits? Okay, that makes sense.
And do that kind of while we're tasting or whatever, it was fine. Again, I worked in a very intimidating bar for many years where it's like Beauty and the Beast, but with whiskey bottles. So like a lot of times people were a little on edge when they came in there, especially like when there's no one else in there. It's coming at like 2:00 in the afternoon. It's like, oh wow, it's just like kind of like everything looking down on you. But yeah, I mean, that for me was huge. And I think, any kind of follow up is great, But I think that, for like, again, the educational component is just as important as the value that comes in with it, whatever programming or whatever it could be.
No, I think that's great. It's like recon, and then know how you're pitching it and why it fits into that bar and how they would position it, because that literally says that they've done a little research and they understand how their product fits there and how it's going to be beneficial for that bar. So it's saving time, because if they did no recon, they wouldn't know, and then you would know it right away. Like, you didn't obviously look at this bar beforehand.
Yeah, right. They're like, hey, I saw that you have this rum cocktail on. I know you're a whiskey artist, so you have this rum cocktail on. It looks great. Like, if you guys are doing it with rum, we have some rum for you. I'm like, even if it's a minute, they took a minute to look into something before they came in, and I appreciate that. So that I think is a good thing.
I think that's the great approach. So Marty, I know you've approached a lot of whiskey bars, and so what's your philosophy when presenting different whisky?
Well, first off, let me tell you, a whiskey ambassador's nightmare would be going into Jack Rose and trying to sell them whiskey. Just looking up and go, oh my God, what could I possibly sell them that they don't already have? And also you would imagine the staff would just know everything, or at least have a pretty good idea. So it's, anyone who would try to go in there and try to try to slip some kind of fast one on you guys. Woo, that takes some cojones. Usually when I go into any bar, I'll look up, and so there's a bar here in Chicago called the Duke of Perth. Wonderful little bar, little Scottish, only Scottish bar in the city that I know of. And you go in, and almost everything on the back bar is single malt Scotch. They have one of every other spirit, basically. They have one bourbon, one rye, one gin, one vodka, one of every other type of spirit, but then they have everything else is single malt Scotch. So what I'll look for are what the voids are in there, or maybe there's something lacking, maybe lowlands. You don't have a lot of lowlands. Maybe you're a little too heavy on the peated single malts. That's great. I'm sure you have a lot of peat heads, but maybe, what bourbon you have. If you're going to have one bourbon, when you like it to be something a little more that stands out just slightly more. Things like that. I look into that. But the other key thing, and this goes to what Trevor's saying, is you do have to do some recon. What I used to do when I worked for Diageo, and also when I worked for Bacardi, is I'd work with the liquor reps, and I'd ask them, what do they need? What are their interests? What have they talked to you about? And then when I go in there, I'd ask them what they need.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to them, you find out what are their interests, what do they like. People don't want to hear about you when you go in there. They want to hear, they want to see that you're interested in them and doing stuff for them and moving business for them. So you talk about the benefits. You say, oh, okay, you're looking to build your whiskeys, and the one key thing too, though, usually if I go into a bar, sometimes the rep really didn't think about it. They bring you into some bar, and the bar guy says, I don't get a lot of calls for whiskey. And I look up at his bar and go, that's because you don't have any whiskey on your back bar. I don't go into the hardware store and ask for whiskey either. You know why? They don't carry any whiskey. So maybe you might want to start carrying some whiskey. Bring in a bottle or two, see how it goes. If it doesn't, fine. You didn't make that huge of an investment, but chances are, if you have a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, people are going to drink it. It happens to be the number one whiskey in the world, so I think you're going to do okay. And that's the other thing too, a lot of times you gauge the customer, you go into Jack Rose, they're going to be looking for something unique because that they have everything else. So you do offer them stuff that they might be having a hard time looking for. They're looking for something exclusive. Other bars you go into and you say, look, I know that you guys aren't looking for Pappy 23 because you don't have a bottle of Jim Beam White Label. Yeah, so you might want to start off small. We'll start off small and and work things up and see how things go. And I'll help you out with cocktails. I'll help you out with we'll if it needs a promotion, we'll get you a promotion.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about next. So you're building into something we're about to go into because
I knew that psychically.
You did. You totally knew that psychically because it is about building relationships with your accounts, right? So, Trevor, you told me a great story yesterday about something you guys did to kind of build partnership during the pandemic to kind of help get J Rigger into so many the portfolio into a lot of bars during when everything was shut down because it is a lot more. I mean, there's a million gins right now. There's a million whiskeys, and you might be on the same price point. You might have the same style liquid, but it's at the end of the day, it's you and the relationship you're building and building that partnership. And there's some tools you can use to help an account because it should be a win-win, right? For both of you, you should be in there helping. So Trevor, tell us, you did some cool stuff during the pandemic and now it's paid off. And then we talked to also some of the things you're now helping your accounts with that they just have a lack.
Yeah, it was, a lot of the big houses kind of we talked about when the pandemic hit, everyone got furloughed. A lot of people got fired. It's myself and my business partner, Josh. And I didn't talk about the brands at all. I was just I would walk in and what do you guys need? What do you guys need to stay open? I want you guys to go through whatever you have in stock. When it runs out and you need to re-up, we can have that conversation. But you need floor spacers for social distancing, great. You need hand sanitizing station, awesome. To-go cups, what do you need? And when no one else is coming to see them, right? So think about it as you got all these restrictions just came in, the pandemic just hit, you can only do to-go, you can't have people inside, everything's just been flipped on its head. And oh, by the way, all the brand support just went out the door too. And I didn't want to talk about it. I was I'm in a position where I can go and help these places out, help them even sit down and just throw some ideas about there. How do you get your program transferred over to go, right? What works for you? And that went a long way. That was a couple months, and we set up a different program to try and help some of the bartenders that were out of work, where we were selling shirts and you got to-go cocktails. And I'd use the brand stuff for that. And that was great because listen, no one was Daddy Warbucks after it, but it was helping people pay their utility bills, the phone bills or whatever. It's a couple $100 a week. And so that's what I was concentrating the brand stuff on. And then as stuff started to kind of open again, I would get a phone call hey man, we went through all of this gin. Can you give me the price point on your gin again? Oh yeah, sure. No problem. Go in, talk them through, have that conversation, try it out with the different cocktails. And that really went a long way. And, I've had people that are in distributor meetings and a lot of the big houses are especially in DC, what, how can we get, why does this J Rigger, in so many of these accounts, we've offer them every discount. It's it's not a pricing thing at that point. It's that we were there through and through. We formed a great mutually beneficial, business partnership. And when those are tied in so deep, there's a value to that is not just a bottom line, a price point. And then as places started to open again, I had the benefit of being an operator where I had assets at my disposal to use. It's I was talking with one person who was kind of new into running a beverage program, and I'd known him from earlier on in my career. He was really excited, and I was just going over cocktail costing, right? And I just gave him my spreadsheet that I use for all of the programs that I do, and it's super easy. You plug it in, what the size of the bottle and the price, and it'll auto populate the rest. And it made his life so much easier because he was new to that role. He'd never really done it before, and it gave him a little bit of confidence. And now they're one of our best accounts, and we still go and support and whatever and all that stuff, but it's not I had to go in there and swipe a big amount or spend something down or whatever. It was just spending that extra time and being hey, let's take a look at your P&L. You're just looking at it from the liquid cost. Where's your ice cost? Where's your glassware cost? Where's your loss cost? Where's your spill cost? Like, where is that built into your P&Ls? And so having those tools to be able to help out. I mean, what we did at 5-to-1 with like the profit sharing co-op structure, and I have kit pool spreadsheets and stuff like that, and to be able to talk to people who are in positions where they're worried about the beverage program, but in a lot of situations right now, they're also managing at some level or something like that. I'm like, hey, here's a tool, just use it. Tweak it out to wherever you are. It's fine. You just knock it out. I just want to make your life easier and make your program run more fluid. That's been huge. That's helped us a ton. And as things have kind of opened up a little bit more,
above and beyond, that you're like an asset to them because you're helping them make money.
And there's some places that just don't have beverage fees. They can't afford it. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, do you need cocktail ideas? Like I can, back in the day, I used to be okay with the whole cocktail thing. Like I'll throw some ideas together for you. You let me know. Tell me your pour cost that you want to come in at, and I'll knock it out for you. And then they're like, oh, that's awesome.
Tell me, do you know what a pour cost is? It's like, let me tell you what your pour cost is. What do you want to charge? And let me tell you what your pour cost should be.
Or like introduce them to a company that does like draft stuff, so we can incorporate it on draft. So it's like, it's a lot easier. And like when they're tight on staff and they're running tight shifts, it's like, oh wait, you can do this on draft, like that's crazy. Like we did like a French 175, which, the 175 bottle, we put a French 75 on draft, and, for brunch, it's like you get a 175 full of French 75, and like figuring that out and tweaking all the recipes for it and making sure that it like came out right and the pressure was right and everything. It goes a long way. And then they're like, oh, now we just have a French 75 on draft that we can do all the time. And then we can also sell a $80, bottle of it. And that kind of stuff really, really, really helps. And I think as, we kind of navigate the waters of what we're going to be in and dealing with the virus for a while, like it's something that people should have in their back pocket.
No, absolutely. Because as we know, a lot of people from the industry become brand ambassadors, work behind bars. So it's taking, and I have had this conversation. It's like, well, what are your special skills? Like, what did you learn behind the bar that you take advantage of now because you just know it? Like, how to put together a cocktail program, or how to make cocktails, so you can train them how, because there's a lot of untrained staff out there right now. There's tons of people so desperate for bodies that they're just pulling people from all over the place that never got trained. So there's a lot of, it's almost like we're starting back in 2005 again, where we need to start training people all over again about the classics and things of that nature. So it's going back into your wheelhouse of like teaching people how to cost out a cocktail, how to create systems where they can make things more efficient, and like a draft system. So it doesn't cost you anything, just time, which obviously, you don't really have it, but they will turn back to you. Like I told you yesterday, like one of the things I would do is I would create their whole menus. It would come to Diageo, but they would ask me like, can you throw a Bacardi on there? Can you throw like some of the other suppliers? And definitely talk about that. And I was like, sure. Like, let's just make it happen. I mean, Diageo wasn't happy about it. I was like, I'm being a good partner. Like we have 70% of the menu. I'm giving 30%. So that way they only come to me for their cocktail program. They don't go to anybody else. And I would give them a list of the classic cocktails that all their staff should know. Like it was free. I'm like, here, just take this. And I would email it to them. And they're like, oh my God, this is golden. So I think that's a big one. Marty, do you ever have any like things that you used? Like, did you ever create Scotch programs for people or?
Oh, all the time. Well, a big thing for us were always flights, especially in the early days. People didn't even think of them. And then we came up with what was a nip and a pint. You remember those? Yeah. So the whole idea of pairing beers and whiskeys, which unfortunately never really worked because people always thought it was a shot in a beer. Yeah, and it's like, no, you're supposed to be sipping that, but you couldn't hold their hand while they drank it. Food pairings, we tried to do food and whiskey, and then of course, when we were when I go in and sell whiskey, one of the things I'd offer were to do not only staff trainings on whiskey, but also whiskey seminars for their customers, whiskey dinners
Mm-hmm.
and train or do those types of events, which were huge, depending upon the clientele. I mean, I had places where they're asking me to come back 3 times a year, and that was great, but it was a little too much
Right.
for one account. And it's like, that's great, but at the same time, I had one account out in the western suburbs that every time I went back, they had this one liquor cabinet and was getting fuller and fuller and fuller of our whiskey. I said, as long as that's happening, okay, I'll come back. That's great. Tick off my little KPI boxes. Nice. And you know, I'd always try to think outside the box of what we could do for them. And cocktails. I mean, obviously, I was never a huge fan of single malt cocktails. Once in a while, you come across a good one, but
and that's becoming a new category. Have you seen like Glenmorangie X? And yeah, they're making like $22 bottles of like single malts, and they are pushing that hard. Like they're making single malt whiskey for mixing.
Yeah. See, it's funny with some of those too. I mean, I remember having a penicillin in LA at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, that library bar. And I forget what was the whiskey he was using. It's Lefroy, but it was something else. What was the blend? Anyways, I didn't like the blend. What? No, it was another one. It was a Scotch. It was a Scotch. It was another Scotch. But it wasn't holding up, I thought. So I told them switch it to Black Label and layer it with Lagavulin. Oh my God. It was so good. I had so many of those.
Like product placement. There's 2 right there. You're like, let's just try this.
I think I converted that bartender that night.
There you go. It's a subtle conversation sometimes. All right, so we're getting to the end. I want to talk about it. So I thought this was just a funny thing because Trevor, you talked about this yesterday. Some of the things you look back at your younger self as a buyer now that you're selling to people that you could have done better. So what are the things you now look back and you're like, to your younger self, like I could be a dick sometimes, or no?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I definitely think I've cooled the ego out a little bit, but we talked about yesterday is I understand like that there are other brands out there, and I think I'd ever try and go in and be like, hey, I'll give you this amount of money, but I want your whole cocktail menu. I'm like, I'm going to work with everyone. I got friends that work for other brands. I'm never actively going after like this whiskey or that gin or this rum. Like, oh, I'm going to go after that placement, I do wish when I was a buyer and I was, again, like everyone's busy and I understand there's a lot of things, but especially if there's been something that's been like present for, or like if it's been in a certain cocktail or it's on the rail or it's whatever. And for whatever reason, it changes. I wish I would have done a better job of giving the reps who I worked that partnership out with a heads up when it changed, because a lot of the reps are coming in from out of town or their distributor reps have like so many other brands that are going on it. And I just wish I would have been like, hey, you know what? Like we're doing this programming for whatever other brand, and the only way to get the pricing right is to take a 10 case drop. So we're going to have to use this vodka on the rail for a little bit. We still love your juice. It's, nothing, whatever, but I don't want you to like come in to do a spend or bring someone from the brand in and then be like surprised of it, because I think that would have gone a long way. And I remember there were times where that happened, where it was like, for whatever reason, sometimes it was in my control, sometimes it was out of my control, where something would switch and then someone would come in like, oh, like, hey, I thought this was, I thought you guys were using this and that. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Now I have to like tell you this, like in the middle of a rush, like we had this event and the only way to like get the cost down was blah, blah. And then it just seems like a little disingenuous. And I like to be respectful of people's time too. Like they're taking time to come in and try and support you. And so that's probably the biggest thing, would just be like, yeah, hey, here's a quick heads up. Like
buyers,
we might revisit it, but I think it just helps. I mean, because it is a two-way street, and I think people need to understand that. It's like, this is a mutually beneficial partnership, and it's a business partnership, and like, don't take it personally. Like, and I think one way that you cannot take it personally is if that if I were to have done a little bit more of that proactive outreach for like, hey, you know, so on and so forth, like just giving you a heads up, like we have to do this, you know, it's not forever. You know, we're going to get back to it when we can. We really appreciate like all the, you know, hard work that you put in and like building this partnership. Or even be like, is there another one of your SKUs I can work into another part of it, right? Like, hey, I got to do this, you know, vodka activation or programming for the month. Is there something else I can like sort you out with? You know, so stuff like that I wish I would have done a better job of, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Or just letting me like, hey, this person's making me this great deal, you know, and my boss is saying like, we got to do it. But is there any way you can match it? Like, is there anything that you could do that maybe we could work it out? Or I don't know if that's a thing, like, you know, just giving them the heads up, because, you know, then they know like, no, dude, I totally get it. Like, yeah, I appreciate the heads up, but I can't match that. But like, let's, you know, continue the conversation. I think that's just being respectful on both sides. Marty, do you ever have any, like, you know, a story about any buyer that just really sticks out in your brain that was just
that was horrible?
Yeah,
I love that.
Oh my God. Yeah, I have loads of them. Actually, one of my very first
well, how do you
ones.
handle it? Like when you meet that buyer, what would you do?
Oh, my very first one, actually, about a month into the whole full-time master of Scotch thing. It was for St. Patrick's Day. This Irish bar here in Chicago had asked if they could, they wanted Johnny Walker and the Classic Malts to sponsor a pipe band. And I said, okay, it's Scotch, but you want to sponsor an Irish pipe band for St. Patrick's Day. Okay. So yeah, we'll do that. I'll give you free product. And I think I gave him $200 for the pipe band or something like this. And I said, all right, but you can only have our whiskey on the back bar. I gave him Johnny Walker. We had all that cool POS during the Shefflin days. So it was Johnny Walker dartboard. I gave him T-shirts, a bunch of Johnny Walker, I don't know, loads of Johnny Walker swag. So this was for 3 days. And so on the third day I walk in and I didn't see the dartboard up. I didn't see anything. I didn't see the band. I didn't see our whiskey on the back bar. I didn't see anything. And the manager, the Irish manager who I talked to wasn't there, but the owner was there and he was really, really drunk. And I went up to him. I said, hey, excuse me, I was talking to your manager. I'm sponsoring your pipe band and everything. And I go, where's your pipe band? He goes, they're not fucking here. I go, okay, well, I'm sponsoring. I don't see the whiskey or anything else. And he goes, you can here 3 days a year. Where are you the other fucking 362 days there? Get the fuck out of here. And he starts moving on me.
Wow.
I go, what the hell, dude? I go, all right. And I was ready, man. I was my Southside Irish up. I go, because he's red-faced, old, you know. I go, oh. I call up the manager the next day and I said, dude, what? He goes, oh, you didn't really expect me to do all that stuff, did you?
Wow.
I go, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that's what an agreement is. I mean, you expected, and I came by. He said, "Come and pick up all that stuff." I did. It was all in the same in the box that I brought. So I just took it back. He decided he wasn't going to carry Johnny Walker ever again. He's out of business.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
So,
I'm sure he is. If people don't like that survived.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, well, we're getting to the end, but I was gonna say, I just remember my favorite is always when people try to steal all of my product. When you sponsor an event and you dropped off, like we did an amazing event at a place called The Vault in downtown, and it was a Hennessy event, and the idiot brand manager sent like 40 cases when we only needed like 5. Right. So they were all behind like a cage, you know, that they locked them up behind. So the event was over. So we're like, okay, so we're going to pack. And it's like Paradise. It's all the expense of like, you know, EXO. It's all the really good stuff. And I go to like, okay, so we need to like load that up now and take it out. And the owner was like, nope. I'm sorry. I'm like, what? He's like, no. That's mine now. It's in my place. I was like, sir, that's stealing. He's like, don't care. It's my bar. It's my product. He's like, you're not taking that out of here. And he's like, and it's locked and I'm not giving you the key. Oh yeah. I was like, sir, I was like, I'm going to get fired. He's like, I don't care. He's like, and there was nothing I could say. I the next day I was like, I finally was like, this is above my pay grade. Like I have to like call somebody. I don't know. I can't remember the end result. And I think they just let him keep it because he was such a big account. I was like, that's like $5,000-$10,000 worth of product that guy just stole.
I used to hate that about the big companies when they would fold to guys like that.
Yeah.
Because I always thought, that all you're doing is encouraging more of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
You should have a goon squad come in and rough him up. I think that's completely legit.
I got away with it once. I actually snuck in. So we sponsored the opening of the Coco Cabana, and we had Dom Perignon, and a lot of the stuff was left over. So I was smart. The next day, I came in at like 8 a.m. before the guy was there, and they had like just their skeleton crew like cleaning up, and loaded it all up. And as he was coming in, I was walking out. He was like, "What?" I was like, we're just picking up the product, sir." And he was losing because the night before he's like, "You can't take that." And I was like, I pretended I didn't hear him and just left. And I was like, "I'll be back," and then just snuck it out of the bar. But anyway, all right. So guys, we're gonna wrap it up. I always like to wrap it up with one question, which is, if you had any, like, there's so many new people getting into this business, and there's a lot of people up and coming. And you guys have been doing this for a while, and there's probably some life lessons you have learned that you wish somebody might have told you beforehand. So if you could share some bit of wisdom of like a lesson that you have learned that you would like to bestow upon somebody else so that they can learn it before they make that same mistake, or maybe a mistake you made that you wish somebody had warned you about, you learned the hard way.
I have three.
Marty has. I'll let Marty start.
Three quickies. One, don't let your job become your life. I taught my niece this. She got in the industry. I said, don't date anybody in the industry. Go marry somebody. Or she was marrying a guy who's a tech guy. So go marry somebody or date somebody outside the industry. Have a life outside the industry. Don't make the industry your life. Or at least have a life separate of it.
Yeah.
Two, keep your options open. Always be nice to folks, even competitors, because you never know. You lose this job, a competitor might pick you up.
That's true.
Also, don't always look for just the big guy jobs. I've been telling a lot of these folks, especially the older folks who get bounced, the big guys, their marketing teams say, "Oh, let's hire young." But, small brands, and especially a lot of these craft distillers, they don't care how old you are. They love your experience. They love the fact that you have connections, that you have the smarts, that you have the know-how. They will love to bring you in. Now, they might not have the
money,
the big dough, but they might be able to pay you just enough. And especially if you've saved your pennies, now you have enough to live on and you won't have to dip into your savings. So
I like it. Those are very good, wise words of advice. Well
there you go.
Said, wise Marty Duff.
With
wisdom, with age comes wisdom.
And I'm very, very old, well into my 90s now.
Trevor, any words of advice?
Yeah, I think, I'm very lucky to have folks in this city that have been supportive of me throughout my career. And I will say, I remember Clyde Davis. He told me one time, he was like, "You have to win at home first." And that resonated with me because he's like, if you don't win at home first, you're not going to win on the road. And the reason that is because you get a little bit of grace at home where you're kind of like working out, like how your pitch goes, how your sales strategy goes, how your marketing thing goes. You get a little bit of grace, a little bit of forgiveness. So you can really tighten that up and really strengthen that. And then you take that when you expand and you go on the road with it in the cities where you're not all the time, and it's sharp and it hits and it's clear and it's direct. And I remember I was listening to him speak about being a brand ambassador at an event, and we were talking about that, and it was like there's something that just stayed with me. And so it's like, even as our business grows, it's like you have to make sure you win at home first, and it'll help. It gives you a nice foundation. It grounds you. It lets you learn. And so I'm always thankful to Clyde for a lot of things, but for that bit of advice for sure.
That is very good advice. Go ahead, Marty.
I tell small distilleries that when they reach out to me about, hey, how do I get distribution in Chicago, blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, how are you doing in your home market? Yeah, well, we're doing okay. Well, do more than okay.
Mm-hmm.
Really kill your home market. Really just conquer it. The Romans didn't kind of do okay in Rome. And then, but thought, let's go conquer Gaul first. No. They spread out, baby. That's how you gotta do it. You gotta,
it's so true. There's a great words of advice, and a lot of distributors say that if you're not conquering it at home, they're not going to pick you up in other markets. Mm-hmm. So, but I also like the idea you can test, some things on your home base and people that you know as well. Well, gentlemen, this has been a fascinating conversation. It's been a pleasure getting to know both of you. So thank you again for your time and your effort and for all the things that you do for the industry. So yeah, it's a wrap. Episode 42.
Thank you so much. It was so good to catch up with you both.
Thank you so much. And it's good to see you. I look forward to seeing you in person one of these days and having a cocktail. So until then, stay safe and be well and keep drinking whiskey.
All right, later, guys.
Bye,
guys.